Negative, Major Tom. Negative. It is imperative that you remain in the capsule. Oh boy, there you go.
It is the distant future, the year 2000.
Houston, we have a podcast.
This beautiful, sexy, magenta-stained book.
It is really nice. It's probably one of the nicest looking books that I have. I would actually say it's probably second only to that special edition of Dune that I picked up around the time the movie came out.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I like your Dune more than this, but
I mean, it's a close second. They're both really beautiful.
they are both really good. The Dune one, I think the blue is a much more vibrant and like kind of eye-popping color than the magenta on Leviathan Wakes, personally. But they're both gorgeous. I am such a sucker for stained pages.
Well, what I like about the Dune thing is that it's the contrast, right? You got the orange and gold and the greens and the blue. This is just like black, white, and magenta. Well, there's a little bit of blue, but it's like very little on the front cover. I think it's it's just the whole thing kind of flows, whereas this is just, I don't know, less contrast, you know.
Yeah. So, welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. This is episode 5, and we are starting Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey.
Which is a pseudonym for Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank.
Yep. So I have never read this. I've never read the series. I've never even watched the show, despite most of my friends telling me that I should watch it because I would love it. And I have no doubt that I would, but I was always I'm very much a read the book first kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to read the books before I watched the show, especially since as I understand it, the show ended before the final book came out.
Yeah, I'll be interested. I'm going to reserve judgment for whether I'm going to watch the show until when we finish. But I guess to just give you like an overall view of where I'm at right now after we read the first 10 chapters, which is the first 100 pages.
It was 9 chapters. We stopped at the start of chapter 10.
That's fair. We read the first 9 chapters, stopping at the beginning of chapter 10. I don't know. I like it so far. I'm not really like bonding, or maybe bonding's the wrong word, but I'm not really like vibing with any of the characters so much necessarily. But the plot is very interesting, and the world so far is also very interesting.
I'm sorry you feel that way, because at least so far where I'm at is I like Holden. I'm curious to see where his story goes and how he grows as a character, especially given the circumstances that has now made him the captain of the Shuttle Knight.
Mm-hmm. We can get into why I'm just kind of lukewarm on him as we go along.
Yeah, I feel like he's still not necessarily a blank slate, but he's still very much in the developmental stage of his character arc, I feel. So
Sure.
there's still a lot to kind of build for him. He's very much in the oh god, I don't remember all the stages of the hero's journey, but he's still in that like Luke on Tatooine phase of his character arc, I feel. I like Miller. I think Miller is an interesting character that gives us a belter side of things, which I want to talk about that dichotomy in a minute once we get past this little opening. But I think my favorite character so far is Naomi. I love her. She's fantastic. She gives me that Gina Torres in Firefly vibes, and I love it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think overall Naomi is, if I had to point to a single character that I liked, it would probably be her. I mean, the book kind of opens with a point of view character that we don't get back to, at least at the point where we're at. It's her name is Julie Mao, and I gotta say, that first when I opened this book, like those first few pages, I was like, "What in God's name is Dusty making me read?"
I totally
Like,
forgot that the POV character in the prologue was Julie Mao, and given that Chapter 9 is about Miller investigating her, I don't know why I forgot that was her. That just kind of made a lot of things click for me, and I'm like, oh yeah, her.
yeah. That she seems all right. Based on her, I guess that we don't really know a lot about her from her from her actions. We mostly know about her from what we see later in Miller's investigation into her background as he's, well, preparing to kidnap her. But I'm sure we'll clear that later. But where we open, so she's one of basically the last surviving crew member on her ship, which is called
the Scopuli or the Scopuli.
That's right. Yeah, I've been just calling it the Scopuli in my reading in my head, but I don't know. Maybe it is Scopuli. But so anyway, she's like the last surviving crew member, and there's some sort of invading force. It's not really made clear who or what it is. But she's basically hiding in a locker and drinking her urine, and there was a lot of urine talk. Not just in that first chapter, but like in this whole first first 9 chapters. Way more discussion about urine than I was really expecting, and I gotta say I was questioning you just a little bit at first for that reason.
For the record, I did go into this with no information whatsoever other than it's a sci-fi novel that people love, and you and I are both suckers for sci-fi, so
that's fair. That's why it wasn't like too much. It was just I didn't really blame you. I didn't think you were you were behind this, but I was like, what has he gotten us into kind of situation.
Yeah.
But anyway, so apart from that, so Julie, she's been hiding out for, I think overall she was hidden for
it's 6 days, I think.
Or was I thought it was 8 days, because I think it was like 6 days, and then she waited another 2 days when she didn't hear anything or something crazy like that.
You might be right. I remember it makes a point to reference that she'd been in there for 6 days and then something happened, and then maybe it was like 2 more. I don't. It's been like a week since I read that prologue, and I did kind of speed through it for the record, so I may not have every detail committed to memory anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. And so she's after that she leaves her little locker. Oh, there's one thing that she hears. This is pretty early on in her locker time. I think it's about 4 days in. She's getting ready to try to leave when she hears outside of the locker one of her crew members pleading for their lives, and then it sounds like they're getting thrown out of the airlock.
Yeah, he gets what Javik craved to do.
He gets the Javik special.
Yes, he does.
But through all this point, to the credit of. I don't remember their names. I'm going to be honest. I just read their names, but I'm just going to call them Corey as a unit because that is what they're using as their pen name.
I think that's fair.
So what Corey does here is he does a really good job of creating the sense of oppressiveness, and it's like it's a very uncomfortable read for numerous reasons. At first, it's just apart from the things we mentioned, it's just he does a really good job of capturing the claustrophobia and like the sense of dread. But I think that that there's not a lot that is communicated in a good way. Like you still are not fully cognizant of the nature of the threat to Julie. And the reason I'm being kind of cagey about it as well is because after she gets out, she leaves, she's going around the ship, And what's remarkable is that there's nobody there. There's not really even that much of a signs of struggle or anything that's really happened, until she gets into the engineering deck and she sees one of the reactors has been covered in this very grotesque fleshy mass, and she's obviously taken aback. And at that point, she sees protruding from the fleshy mass the head of one of her crewmates, asking her to help.
It was the captain,
And then
wasn't it?
It was the captain, yeah. And then her part of the story heretofore ends. We don't know what happens next there.
So, given the importance of her character, obviously her being a prologue character, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's important. A lot of times, in a lot of books, they'll just use the prologue character as a conduit to establish the story and then kill them off at the end. George Martin does this quite frequently.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's important to point out also, for that comparison specifically, that one of the guys that makes up the James Corey partnership, actually, didn't he work for George R.R. Martin as like an assistant or something?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he was like an editor or an assistant or something. I don't know all of the different positions that author assistants are, but yeah, he worked with George Martin for a time. I think until writing these books, which was 2011 when the first one came out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So he either went up through A Dance with Dragons or a little before. I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into this. I just know that he worked with George Martin for a long time.
Sure, I don't necessarily think it's like super big deal. I just wanted to point out that he was obviously clearly influenced by his work with Martin.
Yeah, I can see some of it too. I can see some of the kind of osmosis that comes with working with someone like that permeate through some of this book. Nothing super crazy. Not something you would know Martin for, like his vivid descriptions of sex and food. Nothing quite like that, but I do feel that kind of that weight that you can find in some pieces of Ice and Fire in here as well. That some of that what's the word I'm looking for? Not foundation, but that some of that genetic kind of backbone.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I just thought I would point out that's kind of interesting is that it's almost like a 180 degrees away from the Martin-esque food depictions, because all that you really see here are like protein bars. They're like it's very pointedly. It's almost. I wonder if it's intentional even. It's like very pointedly little description of food.
Yeah.
It's like the most you'll hear is like, and then he threw a protein bar at Naomi or something like that.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where it almost has some sort of grounded realism where in space you don't have fresh food. Like, yeah, I'm sure they have like refrigerators and shit, but you have to plan for long voyages where you're not gonna restock super frequently, especially in situations like the Canterbury, who's going back and forth from Saturn Station to Ceres.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so it makes sense.
That's one of the big things actually of the book, that they really do this to kind of get you into the psychology of the Belters, which is a term that is used to refer to the people that live, the people that live outside of the reaches of the interplanetary, I guess, places where like closer. They don't live closer to Earth or Mars. They're kind of in Star Wars. They kind of use the term Outer Rim, but it's not quite apt because a lot of these people, they don't necessarily live on a planet, but a lot of them seem to live in like installations or like space stations or something like that.
Yeah. Let me look where on the map. The handy dandy map we have here where Ceres is.
Oh,
yeah. So
we had a map.
Yeah, so I mean, Belters, I feel like it's decently self-explanatory. They're in the asteroid belt that separates the first 4 planets with the back 4 planets. So yeah, it seems like we have like 3 or at least like 3.5 factions so far. We've got the I guess we'd call them the interplanetary people, but even then, I feel like those should be separated into Earthers and Martians. So that's why I say like 3.5.
Yeah, they very pointedly point out that the relationship between Earth and Mars is pretty much constantly in flux. Like it gets worse and better over time, over the centuries even. I'm not sure how far in the future this is supposed to be, but they did mention there is a centuries-long history between Earth and Mars. It's not always like very warm or positive.
Yeah, and then after that we have the Belters, which are the people that live along the asteroid belt, which something I find, before I jump into the outer, something I find really cool about this the story so far is how the effect of gravity has a realistic, I'm assuming a realistic, take on growth and development in humans. So we have they call them all Earthers, even if they're Martian. I feel like, or maybe I forgot if there's another term for it.
I think they say at one point that Martians they're similar in sort of the physiognomy, but like Earthers they're the shorter, stocky because of the effects of gravity, obviously.
But yeah, the Belters are taller, lankier, more slim because of the lower gravity compared to Earthers, and I think that's really cool. But something about that I find this interesting is how it creates a new sort of prejudice to where it's, in modern society we have people who have prejudices based on someone's skin color or their nationality or their sexuality or anything like that. And in this world, none of that matters anymore. It's purely just what planet you were born on, which is a more macro scale of racism comparatively. Because I guess that's a logical, albeit very pessimistic take on a hypothetical starbound future for humankind.
Well, I think it's kind of a function of like the economic nature of their relations that it kind of gives rise to these things. I mean, obviously you have their surface level physical differences, which I agree is an interesting and cool take. It's something that I've not really seen done in anything, and I think it's a definitely interesting way of representing that. I think the differences really lie in terms of like the economic relationship between the belt and the inner planets. I think it's a lot more the places the outer, the people in the belt, the Belters, they live a mostly like subsistence and extraction based economy. Like they don't really seem to be, there's not like a lot of like heavy industry that we've seen so far, or any kind of really like major economic modes of development. You don't see like a tech industry or health industry. Again, that's kind of early on, but a lot of what you're getting the sense of here is that they are like an extraction based economy. And historically that's kind of become that's a lot of that undergirds a lot of like the relationships between and negative feelings between between different classes of society. So you have countries that they benefit from extraction, and that kind of like it's not like a directly colonial relationship necessarily all the time, but like it is like a economic colonial relationship where the extractive people they produce the raw goods, but they don't really see a lot of the surplus from the refinement and use of these things, and oftentimes they live in very humble circumstances. And I think that's something that they really show in Leviathan Wakes to this point, is that the people that live in the Belters and oftentimes the people that work on the ships that do the extraction, they live very kind of like meager lives. They live in small um, little. I think at one point they even just refer to them as holes.
Yeah, they
Even.
refer to. I can only assume that they're apartments. They refer to them as holes.
Yeah, I think they were like drilled into the side of an asteroid, but the point is they live in literal holes. Like yes, they have like walls and like stuff, but it's like these are people that are living a very kind of meager existence. And then there's a lot of the Earthers, and especially as we come to see later, the Martians are very heavy-handed about their military might. So that kind of creates like a sense of like you get a sense of like a lot of Belters are resentful towards interplanetary people because of the I think in large part because of the economic relations and the high-handed treatment that they often receive from these interplanetary people. Whereas I think the feelings towards the Belters from the it's like that Mad Men meme. It's like I don't think about you at all kind of thing. It's like they're kind of like an afterthought. They're just like just shut up and get me the resources, that kind of thing. They're not very. It's not a very warm relationship, and you see that a lot in the governance that we do, the little bit that we do see. We see that these are mostly like corporate appointed governments, which it lends it a very distinctly kind of cyberpunk-esque dystopian feel in that respect. It's the corporate governance of of these settlements.
Yeah, and I get that a lot through the Belters too. I get a really heavy Blade Runner vibe from it on Ceres when you have the Belters, and they have some sort of weird kind of low language where there's a lot of slang and just chopping up words, and then you have also mixes of German and Spanish in there as well. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the language in Blade Runner, where it's like a mix of a bunch of different languages, but mostly like I think Mandarin in Blade Runner.
I think that's right. I think it was like Mandarin and English, kind of a hybrid language.
Yeah. So I think it was chapter 2 when it's Miller. When it was showing all that, I was just getting really heavy Blade Runner vibes from it. I'm like, man, I'm gonna love this book. I know it.
Yeah, it's that's so. When I said earlier that I'm like not super bonded to any character yet, but I am enjoying like the world and what we're seeing about and the plot so far. I'm sure I'll get around to feeling more positively about the characters, but as the story goes on. But I really have to give a lot of credit to Corey for the world building here.
It is really good. I find myself really invested in the I say the world, but really it is the solar system that they have crafted so far, and we're I still feel like we're on page, was it 101 is chapter 10? I haven't looked at how many pages are in this book, but we're a good way through it. There's not 600, it looks like. Mm-hmm. There's about 561 pages, and we're on page 1. We've read 100, so we're a little under 20% of the way through this book, and plot-wise, not a lot has happened, but I really feel like I have a really firm understanding of at least the bare bones idea of how this universe works. Like some of the more foundational ideas, especially, it's the most heavy-handed spot, but I feel like it's the most important spot, is the relationship between the inner planets, the Belters, and the outer planets. Mm-hmm. And that's been really well done, and I think that's going to be the source of the conflict of at least this novel. I don't want to speak to the series as a whole, but yeah, the setup with this ambiguous was it Mars, was it not Mars thing, that the inciting incident of this novel. Yeah, I feel like it's all breeding from the tensions come from this racism, for lack of a better term, and Now, I don't want to go as far as to say oppression. Maybe there is a little bit of oppression. We can definitely see some small scale form of it with the story about Anderson Station.
I would say there definitely is a level of oppression. I mean, like we're saying, like the people that are doing the predominance of the labor, the mining and the extraction industry, like I've said, they're living in literal holes, and they're living under like corporate total, like a very totalitarian corporate rule. Like you see, like there's not a lot of sort of civil rights that these people are afforded. And frankly, the security forces and are operate as like there's not a lot of restrictions on them. They're able to like kind of go into people's dwellings without any kind of restrictions. And well, the reason I mention this is because the whole point of Miller's story here to this point is that he's a detective, right, on the station, and he's mostly what he's wants to be involved in is kind of like these low level street crimes and like gang tensions. That's something that we see at the beginning of his story. He's interested in looking into, but very quickly he gets involved by his superiors in this plot to kidnap Julie. Which is kind of a very strange thing. We don't really have a lot of the details. We know that Julie is a scion of wealth. She is the daughter of this family that controls this very powerful shipping industry. Not one of the most powerful, but like a pretty powerful one. And so she's kind of like a free spirit. She very much sympathizes with these sort of outer planet peoples. And they mentioned in her college years she's been involved in different advocacy groups for those people, and as well as later kind of like joining a more, I guess, a more militant, I would say, sort of resistance group. The book likens them to the IRA, but we haven't really seen a lot of their activities yet. But she is a member of this group called the OPA, which is the Outer Planet. What was that again?
Alliance, I think.
Outer Planetary Alliance, something like that. And she is essentially, she's involved in this because I think there is that sort of friction and oppression by the interplanetary people.
Yeah, and something that I really liked was the relationship they've established so far between Miller and his partner Havelock, who is who's an Earther who's come to the Sarah Station to be part of the police force there, and I think it's a great kind of this is a pretty common trope, the having the person that is somewhat fish out of water being placed into a situation where they are under some form of prejudice compared to their superior, their trainer, or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what Havelock is, which I wouldn't go as far as to say he's an important character, at least not yet. He's just a conduit for Miller.
He's not exactly like Ethan Hawke in Training Day.
I haven't seen that.
It's a good movie.
I've heard.
Great Denzel performance, great Ethan Hawke performance.
Yeah,
but
I've heard it's good.
It's not quite that level, but it is a similar conceit, I would say, because Havelock has like his own way of thinking on the way things should be done, and then there's like the way that they handle things out in the belt. He definitely works as kind of like closer, not exactly, but closer to like an audience or I guess reader POV character. He'll ask the questions that a lot of the people, I'm sure that Corey is anticipating that the readers would ask.
Yeah, and he also gives us some more personal context for the prejudices, because you have the bit where is it with I think it's with Miller and Havelock, where they're explaining the difference on how it's like, you never had to be raised in a place where the air you were breathing wasn't recycled, or the water you were breathing, like it was like the rain that fell on you was dirty, but it was still usable, and the air that you breathed was unclean, but you could still survive on it. And that kind of comparison of where I think a lot of the hate for the interplanet people comes from with the Belters is you get to live on these planets that have these natural resources where you don't have to worry about. Yeah. This is with Miller, because it's when he's telling the story about when he worked in Homicide or something like that, where there was the engineer guy that was working on the air recycling for a bunch of apartments, and he let mold, and then they killed him and threw him out the airlock or whatever. You get this difference where it's like with the Belters, their way of life, I want to say, for lack of a better term, is artificial. Like all of their you have ships like the Canterbury who have to go back and forth at least twice a year, for the Canterbury, at least from what I've gathered from what Holden was thinking to himself, where they're bringing these icebergs from I'm assuming one of the moons of Saturn, so that they can be used as water for Sarah Station, so that the people can, it's water. It's more than just for drinking or bathing or anything like that. It's also for the cooling systems and the ventilation and shit like that. And Havelock even says, why is everybody so up in arms about this? Like, yeah, it sucked that this happened, but it's still a somewhat drop in the bucket for the amount of water that this station needs. And Miller's like, you just don't understand because you're an Earther. You always had this access, whereas with us, we have to have this reliance on the systems working, and if they don't work, then we're fucked, because this is what we need. If the air's bad, we all suffocate. If the airlocks are bad, we all get sucked into space. If there's no water, if there's no clean water, we
they die.
Yeah, they die. So it is a nice kind of in your face. This is where a lot of, because there's even a comment to where Havelock says you're starting to sound like that racist propaganda, and Miller said that's not what I mean, and then in the back of his mind he says, but maybe it is what I mean. So yeah, it's cool that you get that really blunt display of where these prejudices come from, at least some of them, and how something that doesn't seem like a privilege to us, because for us this is just, it's Earth. Everyone lives on Earth. This is just what we know and what we understand. Something that doesn't really seem like a privilege to us, you look at the Belters and you're like, yeah, I can start to see how this can change your way of thinking on some things.
Yeah.
Not to the point of racism. I don't support the racism side of it, but I can understand the resentment, at least.
Yeah, I definitely see that. It's a very interesting and feels very organic and very realistic sort of take on, I think, how the stratification of society, and I guess the development of a society in terms of the Belters.
So I think we should shift to we've been kind of dancing around this, the cause of the like, as I said earlier, the inciting action to the conflict of this story, at least as I understand it as of now. And so we have our main character, James Holden, who is part of this this crew on the ship called the Canterbury, who travels back and forth between Saturn Station and Ceres, delivering icebergs for the water supply. And on their way back to Ceres with a big old iceberg, they get a distress call from the Scopuli that they have to go investigate. And when they go and investigate it,
well, it's interesting because they also have this really interesting conversation where they're not sure whether or not that they're going to go do it, right? They're like, okay, well, I mean, this is the Belter way of life, that we have to answer any and all emergency signals.
Yeah, it's a legal and a moral obligation that they have to investigate signals if they are the closest ship to it.
Yeah, but they're kind of also like, but what if we didn't? They're kind of like kind of like trying to kind of like dance around it. But
Captain McDowell is.
Yeah, Captain McDowell. That's right. He's kind of like, but what if we didn't? But Holden, being the upstanding XO, he's pushing that. Look, we're the only ship in a million clicks around. We need to go take a look. Also, what the heck is a click?
I don't know. I've looked it up before, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. But here, let me just do it real quick. How far is a click? 1 kilometer.
1 kilometer. Okay, wow.
That makes sense. In hindsight, click being short for kilometer. That makes sense in hindsight. But yeah, I never really bothered to check myself.
No, I never did either. That's good to know. I guess that really, I don't know. They do a good job, I guess, then using that as a metric of like Corey does a good job of really highlighting the sort of sense of remoteness. Yeah. It's like I can't even really fathom 1,000,000 kilometers like that. That just I try to picture it in my mind and like I cannot. So that's a really interesting image.
Yeah. But anyways, so they get to the Scopuli, and Holden goes off on the night shuttle with Naomi, Amos, Shed, and Alex.
Alex is their pilot.
Yes, and he is from Texas Mars.
I thought that was a very amusing little piece of backstory there. As they say that all these Martians, maybe not all, but a significant portion of the Martians have a very significant, at least in English, affected Texas accent, which is amusing because they're not actually from Texas. It's just like an inherited accent. But also, there was apparently not that many. There was like a group of Texans, but it was a predominantly, at least in the settlement where the Texas accent originated, a predominantly like Chinese and Indian concern. But they described the accent spreading like a virus, and I don't know. As someone from Texas, I did find that a little bit amusing.
Yeah, they said it was an East India colonization along with China and people and some cowboys from Texas or something. I got a good chuckle out of that.
Yeah, it's an amusing image to think about the Martian cowboy.
That must have been. I would like to hope that Alex is accurate in the show, so that must have been a lot of fun for whoever they cast to play Alex, just to do that. Just hey there, Captain. Howdy doody. Let's go on our ship and fly on to the Scopuli. Here we go. Woo! And he even has that kind of that attitude that you kind of see from people in Texas. That I feel like I can safely say this because I'm a Texan. He kind of has some of those like telltale attitudes that you can see from Texas people. That kind of which I thought that was very funny. As someone who's grown up around people that act similar to Alex, I just got a kick out of that because it just reminded me of that, and that was funny.
Yeah, he was a very amusing character. He's also pretty likable. I might be showing my own Texan-ness there, but I did find him pretty likable.
Yeah. So they make it to the Scopuli, and nothing's there. Just absolutely nothing. They find the distress beacon. It hasn't been activated. They find a different device, which was what actually sent the beacon, and they're like, uh-oh, this might have been something that also triggers when somebody finds it. So they start heading back to the Canterbury. And
also, I just wanted to also point out just real quick, one thing that they also find during that investigation is, again, they find no signs of a struggle, and two, like on the exterior of the hull of the ship, they see that it's been blown up with like detonation charges. It hasn't been like accessed in another way. It hasn't been hit by a missile. It was blown up by detonation charges, which is one of the reasons between that and the not fake distress signal, but like the distress signal that doesn't actually come from the Scopuli, but was like
it was planted.
It was a planted, rigged up kind of system they had there. That was what kind of clued in
a setup.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was something really weird here that this is set up. They needed to evacuate.
Yeah, so as they're heading back to the Canterbury finds a ship that was using some sort of stealth tech to hide their heat signatures, and that ship ends up shooting 6 nuclear torpedoes and nuking the hell out of the Canterbury into nothingness. Which, boy, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, that was a really pretty sharp moment, especially because I think they really, and maybe aid was used for this way. Ade was set up as kind of Holden's love interest. They kind of indicated that they had some sort of romantic entanglement.
It felt very one-sided though.
I think it was Ade kind of humored him, but was also kind of enjoyed the attention as well. Is what I got from all that.
Yeah.
But it was so anyway. Ade was kind of like our. They kind of played that up. I think to really set in to make sure that moment really hit. You know, like the missile that hit the Canterbury. I think Ade was created to.
Give an emotional connection to the tragedy.
Yeah, because I think a lot of books, sometimes readers have a hard time like really, if they don't have that connection, they may not key into like the emotion of the moment or the author's emotion of the moment. Yeah. And so I think she's kind of a creation for that specifically.
Yeah, and to give an example, as much as I love this movie and I find it to be subjectively flawless, despite it having many flaws, I don't ever really feel a resounding connection to Alderaan when it gets destroyed by the Death Star. It's just kind of one of those things to where it's like, yeah, this is something that it's done to really just show the might of the Death Star and the ruthlessness of the Empire. I don't feel an emotional connection. I feel sympathy for Leia knowing that her quote-unquote home planet was destroyed and her family was destroyed. And yeah, through the prequels we get Bail Organa and we can assume that good old Jimmy Smits was killed in the explosion too, and it's like, oh man, I liked him. But even still, when I go back and watch Star Wars, I watched it a couple months ago, and I still don't really feel like that deep kind of emotional connection to Alderaan in a similar way that I feel like Corey did in having us have that emotional connection with the Canterbury, which I do think part of that does come from Alderaan is just a ball in space that we see explode, whereas the Canterbury was a ship full of people that we interacted with, that we saw explode. So I think the difference is a little more of a personal connection, as more we saw these people and we knew these people, instead of it being a more abstract where it's like, this is a planet that's full of people, you don't know them, but it's full of people. So there's a more personal involvement there. So yeah, I just feel like that's a decent example of two different ways to handle a big tragedy like that, and one that has a personal emotional investment that's established for the reader or the viewer, and one that I think, this isn't a fault on Star Wars, but one that doesn't have that emotional connection, at least in the same way, at least to me.
It does point to a certain natural human urge, and I think that's why, you know, like you're saying, you connect more to the Canterbury because you know people there, whereas Alderaan, like you said, it's the ball, it's the abstract idea.
Yeah, it really goes with anything. If you break something down to a more micro level, and it has more of an impact on you. Like if you hear a statistic that says every year, I'm making this up by the way, every year 1 million dogs are left stranded and alone in the US alone, you're just like, oh, that sucks, that's terrible, I wish we could do something about those dogs. But then you see one of those Sarah McLachlan commercials where In the Arms of the Angel is playing, and you get like 5 or 6 dogs, and it's slow motion, and they all look sad because the music's playing, and you're just like, oh man, I can spare 15 cents a day.
Yeah,
it's like that. You know, you once it gets a little more like micro and personal, then it starts to have a little more of an emotional weight on you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it.
So yeah, after the Canterbury is nuked into oblivion, the ship starts to leave, and Holden on the shuttle essentially hails the fleeing ship and says, "Hey, you just killed all these people. I'm going to send you their files and their pictures so you can live with that."
that was my like, dude, what are you doing? That's why I haven't connected fully with Holden. I guess that's one of the moments. It was like, what are you doing, you crazy man? Because they could have just, because they were in hiding essentially, because they had gone behind a smaller, like, I guess, meteorite, and they were hidden. And then he blasts open on the radio. He's like, I'm going to. He's so mad, and obviously, sensibly so. But it's like, your primary responsibility in that moment is you have to keep everybody alive. You have to, and if nothing else, you have to stay alive as the witnesses of this incident. You know.
It was very much a "go ahead, shoot me, you won't" kind of moment, and it did work out. Like they targeted them with their laser designator, and then we're just like, whatever, and then they just left. it's like oh well, it worked.
Yeah, they peace out.
Which I thought it was a funny little move that Holden did that.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy, and I think at first he even goes to try to chase after them.
Yeah,
like he
That's
tells
what he wants to do.
like, in that little bucket to go after that like stealth attack ship that that's like nuclear capable in their little shuttle. I thought that was an almost comical moment as well.
I mean, hey, Solid Snake defeated a nuclear-equipped walking battle tank with a box of grenades, so
That's true, but
it was C4, but you get my point.
But at this point, I gotta say, he's no naked snake. But anyway, I think he has some more radio escapades after that.
Yeah, he sends out a global, or maybe not global is the right word, a just general broadcast to everyone, being like, "Hey, so my ship, the Canterbury, just got destroyed. Here's all the info, the video footage that we found, and all the documents on that. Also, we found this distress signal on the Scopuli with a battery that's printed with the Mars, the Mars Colonial Republic Navy, or I don't remember what MCRN stood for. I know the N was Navy. But yeah, basically the Mars Navy insignia on it. So yeah, that's what we found. Have fun with that information. Bye." And of course, that causes a panic and a riot in the belt because everybody hates Mars and as it is, and now it's like, oh, they're killing our people and they're trying to stop us from getting our resources. Oh, it's war.
Yeah, that's how these two stories interconnect. Because immediately after that, we kick back over to Miller and Havelark.
Yeah, and that situation is just it starts out very, very unfortunate and about as to what you'd expect. People rioting, people causing a ruckus because now they're ready for war at this point. Everybody already hated everybody, and now this is just the spark that ignited the flame. So yeah, that's where we're kind of set up from a global scale moving forward with the plot. In terms of the world itself, that's where we're at with this. The tensions are now at critical mass between the OPA and the inner planets, specifically Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They the way they kind of set it up, and this is something that when we kind of cut back to the on board the Night. That's something that they mention is there's a lot of I guess they have a lot of fear about what the Martians are going to do to them. They talk because they're like that's they talk about how that they're worried that the Martians are going to torture them. They're worried that the Martians are going to just flat out disappear them, because after that broadcast gets out, and after we see the riot on the station, they kind of calm everybody down. I just want to go back to that just really briefly because there's a very moment that I found very kind of poignant, especially. I'm sure at the time it was pretty poignant, but especially now in the kind of the intervening years since the book has come out, is like this sort of sense of like faux normalcy after a major crisis, when you're like the kind of like the anxious going about your day-to-day life in an attempt to kind of like have a fake normalcy while you're waiting on some major event to happen or some other shoe to drop. And I think that's kind of how a lot of people have felt in our world over the last couple of years. Like there's been a lot of unsettling events, you know.
Yeah, we have a real world equivalent of basically like the this post riot thing in Saris is very comparable to, I imagine, how a lot of people, myself included, felt on January 7th.
Yeah, it's that sort of like, so what is going to happen next? So what comes next kind of feeling.
We got the hell of the day before, and then the day after we're just kind of sitting there just like, all right, so how are the next 2 weeks going to go?
But yeah, I see what you mean though. It does a good job of like capturing the feeling that I think a lot of people have had during like these big crisis moments.
Yeah, or even
over the
maybe a better example would be like September 12th.
Yeah, you know, stuff like that, and like or like just these big events, they occur and people are they're just trying to go about their day-to-day life, and it's clear that there's like a lot of anxiety and that it's something is shifted in the people even though they're trying to go about their day-to-day life. So obviously the security staff that that Miller and Havelock represent, they are in Miller's case or no, in Havelock's case directly, as he is an Earther, but like they make a point of saying this like on the day after the riots, other people were looking at Miller differently and acting a little bit differently around him because, you know, he is he may be from there, but he is a representative of the security force, which is contracted by an Earth group. So there's kind of like this heightened feeling of anxiety, even though they're kind of going through the pantomime of normalcy.
Yeah, and you have that moment earlier before this happened where Miller and Havelock are talking, and Miller says that you Earthers and Martians are all the same, and Havelock's like, if a Martian if a Martian heard you say that, he'd kick your ass because, you know, no Martian wants to be compared to an Earther. And Miller's like, yeah, I mean, that may be true for you, but from our point of view, you guys are both basically the same.
Yeah, and I think that was a very interesting kind of moment as well. That was one they do a really good job. Not to keep beating this horse here, but you know they do a really good job of setting up the interrelationship of the different peoples of the solar system.
Yeah, the civil and social strife is not very subtle in this book.
No, but it's not subtle, but I think it's well done.
Oh, so. Absolutely. I mean, it can be heavy-handed and still like well done for sure. This is not a gripe on the book, but it does lack a lot of subtlety. But when it is your primary source of conflict in the socio-economic world that you've established, you do kind of need to have a little bit of a heavier hand on it.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess let's get back to where we were. I guess with the crew on the night.
Yeah, the round out the story so far.
So they're not really sure what to do. They're a little bit worried that the Martians are gonna disappear them or torture them, because after the message is broadcast, they get a call from the legal counsel of their company, and they're like, so that was a really, really bad idea, you know, doing that public broadcast. You basically all but blamed Mars for a military attack, in an act of war. That's what I'm looking for, an act of war here. So we've agreed to work with Mars to investigate. So you're gonna go fly over and report to the nearest Martian vessel, and also if you don't do this, we're going to declare you as you're fired, and two, we're going to say that you're stealing the ship, and so you're going to be basically at that point arrested anywhere you go.
Yeah, so, and that ship, by the way, being the Martian Navy vessel, the Donegar, which is as I think it was Amos put it, a ship that is so powerful it can hit a golf ball sized target on the other side of the solar system. So to call it a warship would be an understatement. This is a Death Star level ship that they're having to meet in what was it, Jupiter that they were heading to? They were heading to Jupiter?
I thought they were heading toward. Were they heading towards Saturn? Somewhere around there.
Yeah. So definitely feels like a bit of a suspicious overreaction that they're having to go meet up with a death machine from Mars after them saying, "Hey, we found this Mars stamp on something that's tied to a ship that created that just committed a war crime." So definitely feels like P&K is in the pocket of Mars right now.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're gonna see. P&K is the name of the company that they work for, the iceberg haulers.
Yes, sorry, I should have clarified.
So I guess one thing that I actually had forgotten that little bit that you mentioned about Amos saying that they could destroy a golf ball sized target from halfway across the galaxy, or however he put it. Yeah. So it's pretty clear to them that they're like, yeah, at best we're going to be taken prisoner. At worst, we're going to be tortured and then disappeared. So they come up with this idea to send a second transmission. They're transmitting ostensibly to the Martian vessel, but they also, again, kind of do it on an open channel for everybody to hear. Where they're like, okay, hey, Mars, we're going to be over there, and we're going to totally cooperate with the investigation. All right, we'll see you soon. We'll see you in a few days. Okay, This is us. We are alive at this point, and just letting everybody know.
It's like like if your boss sends you a threatening email, and in order to have a power play back to them, you just hit reply all.
Exactly. It's they really they really just said reply all. So anyway, they do that to kind of, in their mind, they're like, well, at worst they can't kill us because there's going to be questions if what happened to us.
Well, he says it in the message directly. He says if anything happens to us, that just lends more credence to the idea that Mars did this.
Oh yeah, I guess
that's in the message.
Okay, so again, he kind of doubles down, and this is another thing that was kind of a risky play, but so he basically is doubling down here, and but I think he's hoping that by doing this, he can at least guarantee that they live.
I don't know. You may not feel the same way about this, given you saying earlier that you didn't feel a strong connection to Holden yet. But to me, dude, Holden is such a fucking baller. Like, oh my god, to hail the ship as they're leaving and being like, "Hey, motherfucker, here's all the people you killed," and then to also hail the Donegar and be like, "Hey, if you kill us, you're just gonna let everyone know it's you. By the way, we're telling everybody this too. So, balls in your court, motherfucker." It's just such a cool little just spitting in the face of authority thing that he did in like two different occasions, and to me that just I don't know, I think it's great character moments, and I just smile at that, and I'm like, this dude's cool as hell. I'm gonna enjoy following this guy's story.
They do definitely work as really nice character moments. The reason I'm not really vibing necessarily is because I'm like, this just feels very reckless and unnecessary. Like he's supposed to be responsible not just for himself, but for like being able to give record of this event and also the lives of the people on the night. Like it just feels like he's to me he's losing the plot a little bit in an attempt to, and a very understandable and justified feeling of rage in this incident. Because especially like we were saying, his love interest, she's dead. People he says that, I think they say at the beginning he's worked on this for, was it 9 years?
It was 5 years. It was 9 round trips, and they did 2 round trips a year.
That is right. It was 9 trips, 5 years. So he's these are people that he considers close friends because when you're on a vessel like that, you don't just work with these people. You live with them. They are, if you don't become friends, you're going to hate them.
And even
pretty
as
quickly.
even as Ade told him, he's comfortable there, and that's why
Yeah.
he's not planning on leaving, even when she was planning on leaving after the next couple of cycles.
Yeah, that's true.
But I do think that your criticism on Holden definitely holds true with the hailing the attacking ship as they're leaving. It very much was a risky play that just happened to pay off in their favor. But at least with the sending the message to the Donegar and saying, "Hey, don't kill us, or else everyone's going to know you did it." That's something that the crew as a whole agreed on. That was something that he was like, "Let's do this in style because we can't run. So if we're gonna give ourselves up, let's make sure we do this in the biggest way that covers our asses." And yeah,
See,
that's something that the crew more or less agreed on how they handle it.
by that point, yes. By that point, definitely. You're too far gone. At that point, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. The question I had was the previous transmission to broadcast on an open frequency, like what just happened, because it caused. And this is something that Miller mentions. He's a little bit frustrated at this point with Holden, because he knows what that's gonna mean. It means there's gonna be a lot of chaos and riots.
Yeah,
he's kick
looking.
off.
He's looking at what Holden's doing as stuff that's going to cause him problems on Ceres because of how the people are going to react to it, which is very fair. And I don't think it's fair to hold that against Holden, at least as a reader, because obviously he's not thinking about what the societies on the belt how they're going to handle this. He's more so just thinking, I want to get justice and I want to cover our asses at the same time. So I don't think he's thinking about it as a global big picture kind of thing, which is very fair. But yeah, it's understandable that Miller at the same time is just looking at it and he's like, "Oh, this self-proclaimed martyr, self-righteous asshole sitting there putting us in this situation. Who does he think he is?"
Yeah, I think there's a lot of. I think they do. Corey does a good job of creating a very two perspectives. This is something people say a lot, that you have to have good characters, they have their own distinct motivations and their own distinct perspectives, and to be honest, I don't think a lot of things fully succeed in that. I think a lot of things they kind of they or if they do, it's not as well fleshed out as they should be, and I think they do a good job of giving the people with different motivations and perspectives a very understandable and believable feeling to them.
So that wraps up our story so far with Holden. But to kind of wrap up Miller as well, the riots have calmed down. Havelock is seeking a transfer to a place that's a little more interplanetary friendly. And now he is at the behest of Havelock is now investigating the case that his boss put him and only him on, which is looking for and returning Julie Mao to her family, her rich family that wants her back, and they suspect kidnapping. Which I don't think I'd go as far as to say that she was kidnapped in the context of the Scopuli. That very much was she went on her own, but I definitely think I would have thought that she was just dead. But the fact that they're spending this much effort on her makes me think that she was taken by either whoever did what they did to the Scopuli or something else entirely that we haven't seen yet.
Well, I think they don't really know where she is yet. I think the kidnapping is in reference to what they're wanting Miller to do. They want her.
You're right.
Yeah, they want him to kidnap her wherever she's at, because as we see during his investigation. So he breaks into her hole, and then he uses the universal password, which again, sus.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God, it worked.
It's well, I'm not gonna go there, but yeah, basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thanks, and then he gets in, and he's going through her stuff. He's going through her clothes, and he's seeing her achievements, and he's like, oh, what happened here? How did this little rich girl with a big bright smile, what's the problem here? and he breaks into her computer, and he sees the communications, and there's like a level of artifice to them where they are like the parents are attempting to be openly. They want to come off as understanding, but in reality, they're kind of being manipulative.
It's very
so they're like
thinly veiled manipulation. Come home or else.
Basically, yeah, they're making threats like, if you don't come home, we're gonna get rid of. She had been a racer at some point before this point in the story, and so they're kind of threatening like, hey, we're gonna get rid of all of your racing stuff, and then, which I know that how that sounds, but they're like it's part of, it was just something that stuck out and part of a larger.
It's elites that don't have any context to anything, just trying to flex the only weight they can.
Yeah, it's that they're trying to find something that's important enough to her that they're going to be able to find a way to control her. But to Julie's credit, she's obviously not going for it, because
she ain't about that life anymore.
Exactly, she's not someone you can buy.
Yeah,
and so she's like, you do whatever you need to do with that stuff, and so it becomes. But as he and Miller, what's kind of interesting is he cracks open a beer in her little apartment, and he's reading her emails, and he's like, "Don't do it, Julie. Don't fall for it." He's like rooting for her, and so when she gives the terse response, he's like, "Yeah," which that was a pretty funny moment.
Yeah, that was a fun little moment of endearment with Miller.
And so after that, he's but what happens that's really interesting, and this is kind of where we ended the reading just in general, is he looks at the last email, and it's basically like something is going to happen in the belt very soon, and it's gonna be big, it's gonna be really bad, and you need to come home now. There, whatever we can figure out the details of the relationship later, but you need to leave right now.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. It shows that there's some sort of foreknowledge, at least among like the interplanetary elite, about what is happening and what is about to happen.
Yep, I sense a conspiracy that links this to the Canterbury situation, or at the very least the Scopuli situation. I think the Canterbury was just the ship that happened on the distress signal.
Yeah, I think that whatever is going to happen would have happened even if the Canterbury hadn't been there, but they just had the bad luck of being the flashpoint.
Yeah, the question was not if, it was when.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of where we left off, and as I said back up at the top, I feel very strongly positive at this point. I'm liking it. I'm really interested in the story, and I'm very kind of excited for where it's going to go.
We seem to conveniently pick really great spots to stop at.
I don't know. It's that it's like you remember when we used to watch movies together when we lived closer by, and I'd be able to just find the right perfect moments to pause when someone's making a really weird face.
Yeah, we'd stop for conversation, and you just happen to pause it on the funniest still you could find, just by pure chance.
It's that. It's just I still have that innate natural sense of when to pause.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because like when you asked me how far you think we should aim to go for this first episode, I was just like, I don't know, the closest chapter to page 100, which is more or less what you suggested initially with House of Leaves. But I was much more confident we'd be able to hit this mark with this book comparatively.
Yeah, this is a very different book to House of Leaves. You probably have noticed that there's a lot more, I guess, plot discussion. But that's kind of the nature of these books. Like, there are themes, and I think we did a good job of talking about them, particularly the themes about class and, like, the sort of colonial relations. But I think a lot of what this is like a more plot and character-driven story.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be that's going to kind of reflect in how these episodes go.
Yeah, and as you can see also, it really cuts down our discussion time. So yeah, hey Nikolai, we did it. We cut down the episode time.
Yes, our good friend Well, some of the I think I really like those early episodes that we've done, but I'm happy to see us ending around here.
Yeah, this is definitely a more digestible time frame to cover, and I think this is it's a different beast entirely, because we went from this incredibly weird, uh, just super analytical, abstract novel with House of Leaves. And now I feel like this is our, we just ran the marathon, and now we're on our cool down walk with Leviathan Wakes, which is just a great sci-fi, just what you see is what you get, really well written, really fun story that is an absolute page turner. That is just, it's just a fun read, and I'm so happy I picked this. I'd been wanting to read this book for a long time, for years now, and this was just a perfect excuse to finally pick it up and read it, and I'm so happy with that because I love this book already. It's fantastic, and I'm so excited to keep going into it. And I think that's nothing shows that better than the first week of House of Leaves. We stopped at, was it like page 30 something, where after reading chapter 4, and after the first week of Leviathan Wakes, we read 100 pages. We're already 16-17% of the way through the book, and all I'm thinking about is I can't wait to get back into this. I can't wait to see what happens next. And that's not a slight on House of Leaves. These are completely different. They're non-comparable books.
Yeah, it's just, using different. I don't want to say parts of your brain, but it almost feels like that. There's just a different level about what's going on. Like House of Leaves, you're not just reading the book. You're having to do like a certain interpretation. Whereas here, it's a little bit easier, a little more flowing, a little bit more in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I think that's a nice spot that I think we can end today on. A shorter episode comparatively to House of Leaves, but I think this is something that we should probably aim for being the standard. Maybe this being one of the more longer side videos.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
But yeah, that was the first episode of Leviathan Wakes. We are going to be starting on chapter 10 this next week, and I don't know how far we're going to go, but I am excited to see where it takes us.
Definitely. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you later.